Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Courtney Gardner, and I'm a marketing coordinator here at Perficient, and I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar, Boost Revenue and Profit Performance with Oracle IBPX. Time permitting, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the event, so please type your questions into the Q&A tab located to the right of your screen, and feel free to do that at any time. Two questions often come up with our online events. Can I get a copy of the slides and a link to the recording? The answer to both questions is yes. We will email you with information on how to access both the slides and the recording following today's event. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Richard Larrabee with Oracle, as well as Kent Davis, Don Ford, and Alistair Love with Perficient. Richard is a manager supply chain solutions at Oracle with a primary focus on end-to-end solution chain transformations. He has extensive experience with both products and service solutions at the corporate as well as departmental level. Kent is a director and Perficient's Oracle SCM practice and product leader for IBPX. He has over 30 plus years of management consulting experience delivery for large global transformation projects in Oracle for SCM and manufacturing customers. Don is a director in Perficient's Enterprise Performance Management practice. He is an accomplished Hyperion applications consultant with more than 18 years experience in information technology consulting. He has extensive experience with business process analysis, business process re-engineering, and project program management. He has led or participated in multiple full lifecycle implementations and upgrades. Alistair has 2 decades of international and domestic experience working in the oil and gas industry with expertise in supply chain and logistics innovation, transparency, competitive advantage, and systems transformation, and how all can be accomplished via Oracle ERP, EPM, SCM, and analytics. Now, I'd like to hand it over to Alistair to introduce you to Perficient.
Thank you, Courtney. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and we appreciate everybody's time today. Our agenda today is going to cover several topics, all of which are related to integrated business planning. In a moment, we'll talk about some historical challenges with enterprise business planning, trends and challenges in several of the key industries that Perficient has experience in, those being manufacturing, utilities, and oil and gas. We'll cover what is Oracle's integrated business plan offering, and then we'll close with what is Perficient's integrated business plan service. Perficient at a glance. Today, we have 35 global locations. We have locations in all of the US, Latin America, Europe, and Asia, trending towards revenue closer to $1 billion in 2021. 4,500 global colleagues that are again represented all throughout the Americas, Asia, Europe, and other continents, and we are absolutely traded on the NASDAQ under PRFT. Our Oracle practice is almost 2 decades old, headquartered out of Houston, with multiple specializations. Today, we're going to talk about integrated business planning as it relates to manufacturing, utilities, and oil and gas. We also have significant experience in healthcare, financial services, consumer markets, automotive, etc. We are recognized by Gartner and Forrester and Oracle as well for being a leading provider in the Oracle ecosystem. And our Oracle practice represents ERP solutions, supply chain management shown above, EPM, enterprise performance management, analytics, all a part of this integrated business service. We also have a thriving human resources practice and data and analytics. To get it kicked off, we're going to pass on to Don Ford to share with us some of the historical challenges around business planning.
Thank you very much, Alistair. So when we think about historical challenges with business planning, a number of key areas come to mind. First and foremost, we've seen numerous instances where a lot of organizations associate time with quality. They have really elongated business planning cycles that often go on weeks longer than necessary in hope of producing a better and more accurate plan. Sadly, this lengthy process is enabled by numerous silos of information um, that form the building blocks of the business plan. Now, these silos often come with individuals whose role it is to simply collate, organize, and integrate disparate data. This obviously introduces multiple points of failure, which can affect the efficiency and accuracy, leading to really a very cumbersome and overly complex process. Oftentimes, multinationals that have very model specific challenges by business unit can also add to the business plan complexity. Obviously, there's a relevant need to have specificity in your plans. However, with the drivers being different, the dependent systems being different, a lot of this complexity is borne out in the ability to then collate or collapse that plan back into the larger organization so it can actually be rolled up. And the disparate systems and the different set of drivers presents a whole unique set of challenges. Also, organizations struggle with simply just having a single version of the truth. This is being recognized by oftentimes many different Excel models where multiple individuals have the ability to change, manipulate, and disseminate these values, these financial figures. Those figures can then be leaned upon, included in board decks, and then that basically causes a whole host of confusion related to the accuracy of the plan. Lastly, what many organizations struggle with is just being able to handle the many different factors that may affect a given market. We call these disruptions. Nimbleness, agility, the ability, to basically align and shift and republish based on changing trends, whether it be environmental, whether it be governmental, is becoming ever more important. However, Oracle facilitates all this by providing a complete suite of Oracle applications with the breadth and depth to plan across a number of different financial and operational outcomes. They're able to seamlessly connect all of these elements together, and then all of this provides a foundation for enhanced and better decision making. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alistair to discuss industry trends and challenges.
Thanks, Don. Picking back up on the subject of business challenges, planning challenges, Perficient has, in our Oracle practice, has multiple decades of experience in many industry areas, but today we're going to talk about manufacturing, utilities, oil and gas, and what we see some of those challenges being. In the manufacturing space, we see 2021 being a pivotal year and there being multiple challenges that will affect the space. The greatest portion of those indeed have to do with planning. We see, and I think many read about in industry magazines, newspapers like the Wall Street Journal, a trend to nearshoring, bringing manufacturing operations from what were offshore areas on the other side of the world, closer to home, whether those be in the same country or an adjacent country. We see logistics challenges. We know that the cost of a 40-foot container from Asia to the United States in some cases is 200% what it was in years past. Supply chains are running leaner. In some cases, there's more shipments, but with more frequency. Raw materials, are being challenged. We know that cotton is in an absolute premium, precious metals, materials used to produce semiconductors, etc. Customer sales are swinging. We see that there's multiple issues being affected in the way that end users actually purchase. Again, going back to this idea of you doing so in bulk or you doing so with more frequency. Financing and all the finance markets is receiving challenges. Regional geopolitics, I think most folks understand that. And then of course, what would post-COVID-19 consumption be after we return to what will be the new norm? In the utilities market, there are also massive disruptions that make it very hard for multiple business units for finance, for sales and operations planning, for other groups to plan with efficiency. Peak energy consumption swings, whether that be in California or on the East Coast or down through the Gulf Coast, continue to be a challenge. Weather patterns we saw last year, and everybody is aware of the fires on the West Coast, but also there were utilities disruptions to hurricanes and weather patterns in 2020, and we expect that to carry through to 2021. Customer expectations on the utility side, we know that customers have a greater desire for data and transparency. Renewable energies are absolutely affecting the utilities market and the end user's desire to have more visibility to those. Strategic pandemic planning. Who could have ever imagined that so many people would have been home at the same time using energy? Blackouts, big topic of discussion, especially on the West Coast. Asset utilization in the utility side. Where are these assets being used? What materials will be needed for repair? And then adoption of new technologies is always something on the planning radar with the utilities companies. In the oil and gas side, possibly one of the industries that had the largest amount of disruption in 2020. We know that on the exploration and production side, that the amount of that work being done is certainly at 40% or less in some cases. Trade and economic uncertainty continue to affect the amount of fossil fuels that will be consumed. We talked about in the manufacturing space earlier, leaner supply chains, certainly happening on both the upstream, midstream, and downstream space in oil and gas. There's a decreased demand globally for energy. We're seeing that starting to swing a little bit in 2021, but the point being that there'll be vacillation and a lot of different scenarios to plan for. And midstream asset utilization, the concept of you have produced something, but now how are you going to get it to your refiners? How are you going to get it to your end users? That again is happening at a rate that was unprecedented in the industry. And then downstream, companies may have gone out, explored, produced, transferred, but now there's lesser demand. And so how do you refine? How do you produce those petrochemicals and plan? We believe at Perficient that all of these disruptors make integrated business planning an imperative, and that it is more challenging than ever given the tumultuous times to be able to produce, plan, and work towards the future. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Richard Larrabee from Oracle to explain to us exactly what is Oracle's IBPM solution.
Thank you, Alistair. Appreciate it. I'd like to just thank Perficient for having us join here. What I'm going to do now over the next few minutes is take you through Oracle's view on integrated business planning and execution, and talk a little bit more about how we came up with it and what some of the components are, so that those of you who are familiar with the Oracle solution family can position this. So like we heard before, disruption is accelerating. Companies are being faced with a lot of new requirements. They have seen in the last 12 months two very far-reaching events in the oil and gas industry, for example, that no one expected, and it's forced everyone to change how they do business. We'll talk about the impacts of these disruptions along with other factors and how IBPX can help in responding with these type of events, as well as improve your overall approach to business planning. As we said, these disruptions are often amplified by other business challenges. You heard Don mention some of them, but these include things like long planning cycles, manual and disconnected planning processes, and the inefficient use of company resources. So let's take a look at these problems in more detail and how IBPX perhaps can help alleviate them. You know, if you think about it, right, the big problem that IBPX is intended to address is allowing you to execute faster with integrated information and make more informed decisions. If you look at your typical organization, regardless of what industry you're in, there are multiple people involved in the planning and execution process, each with different requirements, time horizons, and level of detail needed for completion. Likewise, in many organizations, these processes are managed by a variety of loosely connected solutions with different data formats, different levels of abstraction, and different capabilities around doing things like scenario analysis and reporting. As you can see from the PwC study results on the right, this is having a negative impact on business performance. It's addressing everything from working capital to days sales outstanding to days payable outstanding. And roughly, only 37% of executives believe that their organizations are making high quality decisions at the right time with the right degree of detail. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how IBPX addresses this and how it can provide a platform for everyone in the organization to work together towards the same goals. First, let's talk about how does IBPX work, right? Well, it's really designed to address, like we said, multiple people in the organization, right? Everybody from the CEO down through sales, marketing, product development, supply chain and operations, and finally, folks in finance and resources. When we look at it from the CEO's perspective, right, or the C-level for that matter, we're typically looking at creating an enterprise-wide plan that spans a fairly broad, time frame, anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and will address things like financial goals, market value, and other shareholder-related topics. That plan tends to get decomposed into what people often refer to as a sales and operations plan, right? And a sales and operations plan is basically used to break down that strategic plan into manageable pieces for the operating units to execute against. And it typically looks, out on a 12 to 24 month horizon with quarterly targets. That plan in and of itself then gets decomposed to even smaller components, right? Typically called sales and execution plans, or in some companies, just operating plans. And basically what they focus on is what do the people at the operational level of the company need to be focused on a regular basis to support that strategic operations plan. And then finally, at the lowest level, you have the operations folks. This is really what's going on now and today. How is this impacting my plan? And it really allows folks to, actively monitor the plan and take immediate actions in case something happens or something starts to go wrong. And again, all of these are connected and give you the ability to move up and down the chain as you need to based on your role in the organization. Oracle's approach to IBPX leverages multiple capabilities across a number of our solutions to give you both a single view and a platform to not only plan your business, but also to execute that plan and keep in sync with actual results you're experiencing from your day-to-day operations. It can be considered a closed loop process that allows you to adjust as you go. It also gives you the ability to execute alternative scenarios and see what the potential results are prior to enabling any changes. I think you would all agree that this is a very powerful set of tools for any business to be able to use to help them perform better. This is just basically another way of looking at it, right? Kind of my simplified view for folks. And the things to take away from this slide really are the following, right? One is that Oracle's approach to integrated business planning and execution is a single integrated platform. The second key thing to take away from this, it gives you the ability to not only act, but react as well as things change, and make sure those changes are captured across all levels of the organization. So, in the end, really what you're providing for yourself and your organization is the ability to know sooner, act faster, and ultimately get better results in your organization. Let's also take a look at kind of what are the components that make up integrated business planning and execution. For those of you who are familiar with Oracle's product family, some of these names should look familiar to you, but for those of you who are not, I'll provide a little bit more detail. All right. The base components required to implement integrated business planning really rely on two items or two solutions, right? The first is Oracle Enterprise Performance Management Planning Module, and the second is Oracle Supply Chain Management Cloud Sales and Operations Planning Module, right? These two modules, again, form the basis for integrated business planning and give you the ability to not only create your financial plans, but also create your operational plans as well. For folks who want to be able to move this further down into the organization, right, and decompose these plans or provide execution plans, we also can add additional products or additional solutions to the mix. These would include on the supply chain side, demand management, supply planning, and supplier collaboration. While on the enterprise performance side would include the budgeting and forecasting tools that are provided in that suite. And then finally, for those who are fully implementing integrated business planning all the way down to the day-to-day operational level, you may also want to consider adding emerging technologies like Internet of Things, machine learning, process automation, analytics, and real-time connections to provide the information going back and forth. So what I've hopefully shown you here in the last few slides is some more detail or better detail around what the Oracle solution looks like, how it's put together, and the value it potentially can bring to your business. So now what I'd like to do is turn things back over to Perficient, and they can talk about how they can help you as an organization evaluate and implement something like Oracle's integrated business planning and execution solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. What I'd like to do now is to provide Perficient's view of integrated business planning and what our solution is based upon the constructs that Richard just laid out from the Oracle perspective. As Richard mentioned, the whole concept of IBPX is on the reduction of latency or the timeliness of disruptions in our market that can affect our business plans either negatively or positively in some cases. It's also the creation of a standard platform that allows all of the information, both from the financial plan and from the operation plan perspectives, in one physical database structure or platform. And so based upon that, we at Perficient have taken those constructs and we have developed a set of solutions and services that I'd like to share with you over the next couple of slides. Our solution, as mentioned earlier by Alistair, is going to give a industry view to the user based upon specific tailoring and the way that our end users would like to see the information presented. Today, we're going to look at a standard manufacturing type of view based upon distinct and discrete items within an organization. But we can also tailor this for many other industries, oil and gas, and others in addition to that as well, given the need and the opportunity. So the Perficient solution and service around IBPX is made up of two distinct things. First of is the integration piece. And so as you look at this slide and you look at the bottom portion of the slide as Richard laid out, the integration here is primarily between the financial planning and EPM and the S&O planning in the sales and operation aspects of the solution. Currently, there's not a solid integration piece in place between those two pillars today. But that's one of the development activities that Perficient has taken on, is to build and develop bidirectional integration between these two pillars of distinct information. EPM, provides financial information. So it's looking at forecasts over a longer period of time, traditionally, based upon lines of business, product lines, categories, things like that. And it's reviewed on a more regular basis, maybe quarterly, maybe in some cases longer than that. But it traditionally is a reflection of what the business plans to perform at from a dollar and cents perspective over the course of that period of time. Now, when we come over to sales and operations planning, that's the operational aspects of how we plan to meet that financial plan through the operations of the business. And that's where we rely heavily on our sales plan, based upon traditional sales forecast and maybe historical aspects of our sales, our demand plan, booked orders and such, as well as the products and SKUs that make up the categories that might have been represented in that financial plan. Again, S&OP is a reflection more of units and SKUs and items and physical aspects that are manufactured or purchased or supplied in some way to meet that financial plan. Now, the third component of this has to do with the actual, the supply planning aspects of this. And this is the actual piece that tends to have the most disruption reflected. When we go back to some of those points that Alistair mentioned in the markets that are affecting production these days, maybe it's the opening and closing of plants based upon COVID impact. Maybe it's the circumstance around the ability to move product or raw materials in and out based upon weather conditions, hurricanes, and other type of things that are occurring. That most reflection occurs at the execution level, at the manufacturing level, the purchasing level, things associated with our sales orders and such things as that. Well, as we see change and adaptation in that information flows back into the S&OP. The importance of the solutions that we're looking at is, in addition, is how do we manage the disruptions that the market can identify. Going back to what Alistair had mentioned earlier, different markets are seeing different types of disruptions for different reasons. And so things like weather conditions, COVID, those affect, the flow of raw materials and supplies that are necessary for our manufacturing or production of product that will be supporting this financial plan over the long term. As we are identifying those trends and seeing those disruptions, that is being integrated back through S&OP back into EPM by the integration data layer that we have built at Perficient. That data layer is a tailored and custom type of activity that we can work with clients on to put certain type of business rules and guidelines specific to their unique circumstances that will help to coordinate this movement of data back and forth. One of the things this integration allows us to do as well is, as we see disruptions or we see certain types of opportunities from the market flowing through our supply chain, we can actually create alternative models in the EPM world and create alternative plans that can be staged and then reviewed and evaluated based on the S&OP activity and the supply chain activity as of that point in time. So it allows us options to either stick with our original financial plan or take an alternative view and apply that new model to the new planning activity based on these type of market conditions that we are seeing. One of the ways that we do this is through a series of dashboards. And the analytics piece of this is so powerful in the fact that we can create an executive level dashboard that anyone can go into on a regular basis, and they can do an immediate comparison between the financial forecast and the S&OP or the operational aspects of the business. So in this dashboard, as you can see, again, this is based upon a manufacturing company that has discrete manufacturing products that they sell. We're looking at the projection of forecasted revenue from EPM and comparing that with the S&OP forecasted revenue based on the conditions that we have in operations to produce against at this point in time. And as you can see here, we can identify based on these two separate measures from the two different aspects of the business, whether or not there's a revenue leakage or whether there's an actual opportunity because the market has created that larger demand. In addition to that, through this dashboard, we can also evaluate our margin percentage. And so we take a look at the projected forecasted margin within the business plan in EPM, and then we can compare that to the different products that we've manufactured and shipped, and maybe looking at that standard cost within those models of those SKUs, we can recalculate projected margin. And in some cases, that margin would be affected by that cost of that product as it's being manufactured. So if maybe we were originally proposing that we were going to offshore a certain line of business or a certain category of product, but maybe for some reason we had to bring that back onshore and now we're manufacturing it local versus offshore, we could have a higher cost of standard cost for each of that manufacturing product, and that would be reflected in most cases as a negative impact to our margin. But as you can see through the graphical representation, these dashboards give us the opportunity to evaluate and manage this overall process on a regular real-time basis. And these dashboards look directly at the data within S&OP and within EPM. So this is a direct real-time reflection of what is happening in those two application areas at this point in time as we run this dashboard. But the other thing we offer within our Perficient solution is, you can see across the bottom of this dashboard, is a number of other drill downs that give you further information. So we have a drill down that talks about how our categories are being analyzed, how our items are analyzed, and even exceptions that are being reflected within S&OP. So what I'd like to do now is show you some additional information. So if we wanted to go in and take a look at well, why is it that we see a disconnect between our margins and our revenues between the financial plan and the S&OP and the operational aspects of business? We can drill down from that initial dashboard into this one, which shows a comparison of the categories. And, in this example, again, this is a discrete manufacturer that produces 4 different types of categories, to their clients: pumps, valves, hoses, and switches. And as you can see here on the left-hand side at the bottom, we're showing an opportunity where the S&OP operational reflection of projected revenue exceeds what the business opportunity, a forecast for that revenue is based upon these categories. And this further gives us analysis as we move from left to right to even look at this even at a smaller SKU level and see the distinct differences that are being played even at a much lower level of reflection. And then I can go deeper even and take a look at the items or the SKUs that make up those categories. And I can see from this representation at the top, those products that provide the highest level of margin, again, based upon what that sale price is, what that standard cost is, and all the other different factors applied, I can see which of my SKUs across the bottom reflect to that higher margin, so that again, it gives me opportunity to move different SKUs in and out based upon the adjustments I need to make for my margin calculations and such. And then we have another dashboard that provides exception analysis. And what this is this is a reflection of, well, what is occurring within S&OP from a standpoint of why are we getting an exception to the plan? So as the plan is presented into S&OP from EPM and it's being executed upon, we see certain conditions that are identified as exceptions. And I'll identify the one that's got the highest number of colors in the far right here. And this is a situation where the demand can't be met because of insufficient lead time. So what we're seeing here across the bottom are a number of different SKUs, and we're seeing that based upon certain types of inconsistencies in the ability to produce that SKU within the appropriate lead time is causing us an exception, and subsequently is affecting the ability to define that margin and the revenue that's been forecasted through EPM. And as you can see also, there's a number of other different exceptions that we can track and we can manage too. So overall, when we bring together this integration with this dashboard and the analyses that provide us, it gives an organization an extreme amount of information on how to quickly react to business trends, disruptions that are occurring, and make manageable and measurable adjustments to those financial plans as necessary going forward. So to kind of close on the IBPX solution, as been stated this afternoon, we've identified that traditional business process of managing integrated business planning has a number of different pain points. We've talked specifically about, certain market conditions that sometimes are hard to track. We've talked about, today there's a lack of integration and alignment between different business units and organizations and how that data is moved back and forth. We've looked at the fact that there's a lot of disparate systems, and therefore the data availability and the alignment between different lines of business is very challenging at times to manage and to reconcile. We've also identified, that a lot of organizations maybe are not as collaborative. There's not the same degree of visibility and transparency. they're somewhat siloed in nature, and frankly, they just don't have a lot of standard process that allows that collaboration that's necessary to perform IBPX on a more frequent and regular basis. So the solutions that Oracle has put to the market and what Perficient has done by adding and developing that into a solidified solution set helps to alleviate these key issues. As we showed with the integrations and with the analytics and the dashboards, much more improved visibility, and the integration goes across the whole business, not just siloed sections of the business. It takes a view of the entire organization and the different lines of business associated with that. We can also use this integration and the analytics to help us define the key disruptions that we're seeing in the market and how that's impacting our financial plan. It helps us to, better manage our revenue and margin. It helps us to reduce our inventory costs and manage the resources used for that production by being able to earlier identify trends of certain types of uptime, downtime of equipment, as well as resources of a plant and such things as that. It allows us to respond to our customers in a more real-time manner with a better likelihood of filling the demand that's been out there. Allows us to manage our working capital better, and more importantly, it allows us to resolve issues faster. It allows us to take the latency out of the business process for business planning and to make those decisions that are necessary to keep an organization on par with the performance that they have been projecting. And again, all of this is stored in a single stack with a single database within the Oracle technology space. And so there's no longer the need to go out and pull in different ad hoc solutions or circumstances. It's now integrated in one single infrastructure, which is so important, as we start to look at the interaction and the integration of the data and how we want it to reconcile with one another. So all of these factors are part of this solution, and we at Perficient would love to speak with you more specifically about your specific need. And I offer that if you can, please come to our next webinar session where we will go into an actual demonstration of IBPX. We will see the actual execution of those dashboards and the integration and the data through a number of use case scenarios that we'll be defining. So more information on that coming very, very soon. So at this time, I'd like to hand everything back over to Courtney and let Courtney prepare for our question and answering session. So Courtney.